he knew the things that were so wonderful and so memorabilia, so in our minds that he knew everyone would want to preserve, and he knew he could trust me to do that. So he sent over these slippers to me, and they never came up for auction. He simply brought them home, I suppose. He's since gone, so I can say that. He also brought home an original pair of the other style of the ruby red slippers, and that he sold to a man named Michael Shaw. They are the originals, and they are really Judy's because I tried them on. And be that they fit me, I knew they were really Judy's.
Debbie Reynolds bought the Arabian test pair from Kent Warner for an undisclosed sum of money. Michael Shaw paid $2,500 for his, a bargain. Warner always believed the pair he kept for himself were the most valuable. They were the close-up shoes without the orange felt, the witch's shoes. For many years, he cherished them. But then he noticed that people were paying more attention to his ruby slippers than to him. Their power consumed his identity. Quite sadly, he realized the charm of the ruby slippers was fickle, and if abused, their power was wicked. In 1980, Kent Warner decided to sell his valuable ruby slippers. He told a friend, "They don't have the same meaning to me anymore." Warner placed them in a memorabilia auction in Los Angeles. He thought they would bring as much as $75,000, maybe more. But prudently, he set a $20,000 minimum. They didn't sell. Warner was furious. They were a steal at $20,000, and nobody knew it. The next year, he consigned them to Christie's East in New York. They fetched a modest $12,600. 2 years later, on April 25, 1984, Kent Warner died of complications caused by the acquired immune deficiency syndrome. He was 41 years old. Treasure will continue in a moment here on A&E. We now return to Treasure here on A&E. If ever there was a real-life Dorothy, she is Roberta Bauman.
Yes, I've been called that a lot of times, but that's a happy thing. I don't mind it.
As with Dorothy, the ruby slippers were never a quest for Roberta. She just happened to find them on her feet.
Well, let's just say, out of the blue, I received something that became magic. And there's a lot of magic to the ruby slippers because it's provided a lot of joy to millions of little kids.
As with Dorothy, the ruby slippers took Roberta on an incredible journey. She met a lot of interesting people along the way. A few not so nice, like Dorothy's Wicked Witch of the West, but most, like the Lion, Tin Man, and Scarecrow, became her true friends. Roberta Bauman never got an answer from MGM, but she did find out to her satisfaction that she owned an authentic pair of ruby slippers.
Well, she actually did have a real pair, and I believe she sold them.
In 1988, Roberta decided it was time to part with her treasure, just as Dorothy decided it was time to go home to Kansas. For 48 years, the shoes worked their charm for Roberta. As she parted with them, they had one more surprise for her. They demonstrated their true power. Despite many private offers, Roberta chose to auction her pair of ruby red slippers at Christie's East in New York City, largely because of their reputation and their collectibles specialist. Her name was Julie Collier, and she had some experience with the ruby slippers. In 1981, she handled the sale of Kent Warner's pair. For that auction, she did extensive research and learned much about their mystery. By 1988, her expertise was eclipsed only by her excitement to represent another pair of ruby slippers. On Wednesday, March 9th, Roberta Bauman held her ruby slippers for the last time. That day, she shipped them to Julie Collier at Christie's. The auction catalog reflected Collier's enthusiasm. The shoes were exquisitely pictured, described, and diagrammed. Today, that catalog is worth several $100s. Quite modestly, the auction minimum was reserved at $15,000.
So, how much are you going to get for these things?
Well, our estimate is $15,000 to $20,000, and from all the interest we've been getting so far, I have a feeling they're going to go quite a bit higher than that.
People came into the house to interview me. They said, well, Roberta, those shoes are going to bring 6 figures. Well, what are you talking about, 6 figures? And then they'd enumerate. I still had no idea. I had no earthly idea. But I heard there were 15 bids for $75,000. And one of them was Ted Turner.
Another hopeful was Anthony Landini. When this lifelong Judy Garland fan learned that a pair of ruby slippers were for sale, he had to see them. So he went to Christie's auction preview.
Something happened to me that day. I just stood by that case. I started to perspire. A shrill went up my body, and I knew that at that moment I knew that I had to own the ruby slippers.
The auction began at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, June 21st, 1988.
The auctioneer said lot number 125, the ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz. And the place went into a frenzy.
20,000, 22.
In 2 minutes, the bidding had gone up to $75,000. I picked up my paddle at $80,000. It went to 85, it went to 90, it went to $100,000. And there was a very adamant young man sitting in the first row who was bidding with me. So it went to 120, he went 125, I went 130, he went 135, I went 140, he went 145. And I stopped, and I thought, and I just heard the auctioneer say,
145. It's only money.
And I shot my paddle up, $150,000.
At that price, Landini won the bidding. Roberta Bauman did not attend the auction. Instead, she stayed home in Memphis and waited for the call.
I felt good about it. I could almost feel when the auction was going on. And I was happy, I was calm, and the telephone rang, and it was Julie Collier. She said, are you all right? Are you sitting down? I said, yes, I'm fine. She said, Roberta, the ruby slippers sold. I said, oh, thank God. She said, that was the most electrifying auction that we have ever had. She said they went for $150,000.
With Christie's commission, the final price was $165,000, a world record for Hollywood memorabilia. Just as the ruby slippers carried Dorothy home to Kansas, they carried Roberta into retirement. As for the slippers, since dubbed Dorothy's shoes, their new owner had an idea.
He called me and he asked me, he said, what would you think if we was to put those shoes in a new theme park that Walt Disney is building in Orlando, Florida? I said, sir, they're your shoes. I said, that would be a wonderful idea.
I could have put them in my living room. I could have kept them locked up in a bank vault, but that would not give me any pleasure, and that would not fulfill my desire of owning the ruby slippers, which is to preserve the magic and show them to the world, to the children. So I contacted Disney MGM Studios theme park, which was just being built at the time, and their answer was, how soon can you get here?
Several days after the sale of Roberta Bauman's ruby slippers, something remarkable happened. Kent Warner's prized pair of shoes, the Witch's shoes, were consigned once again to Christie's. Rather than promote another public auction, Christie's arranged a private sale at the same price, $165,000. They were purchased by a collector in St. Louis named Philip Samuels.
When I was told the shoes were available and they would be the same price as the pair sold at Christie's, and the condition, from what I could tell, was better than the pair that was sold, I bought them immediately.
Once again, Julie Collier handled the sale. But tragically, it was the last time she touched a pair of ruby slippers. In January 1989, she was killed on the streets of New York, hit by a truck while riding her bicycle to work.